He was one of the medieval period's most influential and powerful kings ruling over the Franks. He was also the Christian emperor of the West, but today Charlemagne is buried inside of a golden shrine, a gilded coffin that contains the remains of the former king. He was a warring king and spent a huge amount of his life on conquest, spreading Christianity across Europe. And by the end of his life, he had a huger amount of land and an empire at his fingertips. But Charlemagne's incredible coffin and shrine has been opened many times throughout the years following his death in the year 814. This was not the original resting place of the king, and 400 years after his death, the bones of Charlemagne were placed inside the huge golden coffin and repository. But what has been found inside of the coffin is remarkable and shocking, and it has proven many historical accounts from over 1200 years ago to be actually incredibly correct. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Charlemagne was the son of Pepin the Short, the first Carolingian king of the Franks and betrayer of Leon. When Pepin died in 768, the Frankish realm was divided between Charlemagne and his brother Carloman. As was customary, the division was tense and uneasy, but in 771 Carloman died suddenly, under mysterious circumstances to some, leaving Charlemagne as the sole ruler of the Frankish kingdom. Charlemagne inherited not only a growing empire, but also the responsibility of consolidating its many tribes and territories. The Frankish realm stretched across modern-day France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and parts of Italy and Spain. His early campaigns were largely concerned with securing his borders and bringing rebellious provinces into submission. Charlemagne's reign was defined by relentless military campaigns. His most famous and longest war was against the Saxons, a pagan Germanic people living to the northeast of his kingdom. Over more than 30 years of warfare, from 772 to 804, he waged brutal campaigns to forcibly convert them to Christianity. These campaigns included the infamous massacre of Verdun in 782, where Charlemagne ordered the execution of 4,500 Saxon prisoners who had rebelled. He also campaigned in Italy, where he defeated the Lombards and took the title King of the Lombards in 774. In Spain, he launched the ill-fated expedition against the Moors in 778, which ended in retreat and the ambush of his rear guard at the Battle of Rovrencourt Pass, a moment immortalised in the Song of Roland, a cornerstone of French literature. Through conquest, Charlemagne greatly expanded the Frankish realm, eventually ruling over an empire that covered most of Western and Central Europe. Perhaps the most defining moment of Charlemagne's reign came on Christmas Day 800. While attending Mass at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans. This event had enormous symbolic and political significance. The Western Roman Empire had fallen over 3 centuries earlier, but with this coronation, Charlemagne was presented as the heir to that imperial legacy. It was a revival of the concept of a unified Christian empire in the West and marked the birth of what would become known as the Holy Roman Empire, a political entity that would endure in various forms until 1806. However, the coronation was not without controversy. It put Charlemagne at odds with the Byzantine Empire, which still claimed to be the legitimate heir of Rome. And although Charlemagne accepted the title, he was said to have been surprised by the Pope's act and may have been politically ambivalent about the implications. Charlemagne's imperial ambition was not merely territorial. He saw himself as a Christian ruler with a divine duty to promote and protect the faith. His reign coincided with the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of learning, art and culture centred on Christian and classical ideas. He reformed the Frankish Church, sought to standardise liturgical practices, and enforced moral discipline among the clergy. Under his rule, bishops were better organised and monastic life was revitalised, especially under the Benedictine rule. Charlemagne was a patron of education. Though himself may have only learnt to read later in life and never mastered writing, he gathered leading scholars at his court, including Acluin of York, an Anglo-Saxon cleric, who helped establish a palace school at Aachen, Aix-la-Chapelle. Latin manuscripts were copied and preserved, classical learning was revived, and new, legible script, Carolingian minuscule, was developed, laying the groundwork for the preservation of knowledge through the Middle Ages. Charlemagne's private life was complex and often unorthodox. He married at least 4 times and had numerous concubines, fathering over 18 children. He was reportedly very attached to his daughters, refusing to allow them to marry during his lifetime, possibly to avoid political entanglements. In governance, Charlemagne implemented a highly organised system of administration. He appointed loyal nobles, counts and dukes to oversee territories, but also sent royal agents to ensure their obedience and accountability. He held annual assemblies to review policies, hear petitions and pass laws. These measures were groundbreaking in centralising royal authority across such a vast and diverse realm. Charlemagne died on January 28, 814, at his palace in Aachen after suffering from a high fever and pleurisy. He was 66 or 67 years old, a venerable age at the time. His body was entombed in Aachen Cathedral, which he had built during his reign, and the tomb became a site of imperial coronations and remains a symbol of his enduring legacy. He was succeeded by his only surviving legitimate son, Louis the Pious, but the vast Carolingian Empire did not long survive his death. Within a few generations, the empire fractured under the strain of internal division and external invasion, especially from Vikings, Magyars, and Saracens. Now, immediately after his death, it was claimed that his body was washed and cared for in the usual manner, and was then carried to the church and interred amid the greatest lamentations of all the people. There were some questions at first where to lay him, because in his lifetime he had given no direction as to his burial, but at length all agreed that he could nowhere be more honourably entombed than in the very basilia that he had built in the town at his own expense, for the love of God and our Lord Jesus Christ, and in honour of the Holy and Eternal Virgin, his mother. He was buried there the same day that he died. An gilded arch was erected above his tomb with his image and an inscription. The words on the inscription were as follows: "In this tomb lies the body of Charles, the great and orthodox emperor, who gloriously extended the kingdom of the Franks and reigned prosperously for 47 years. He died at the age of 70 in the year of our Lord 814. And the 7th indiction on the 28th day of January." But this was not the final resting place inside of the chapel of Aachen, but within a few hundred years, desecration of the burial vault began. In the year 1000, Otto III, who wanted to show himself as a direct successor to the great king, had the burial vault of Charlemagne opened. It was claimed at the time that the uncorrupted and perfectly preserved body of Charlemagne was found and was discovered seated upon a marble throne, wearing a crown on his head, and that there was a sceptre in his hand with the Gospels on his lap. Otto III allegedly then robbed some of the relics from his tomb, and in 1165 the remains of Charlemagne were exhumed by Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. He had them displayed as a holy relic, but then Barbarossa had the remains reburied in an elaborate 3rd century Roman marble sarcophagus. But he didn't remain here for long. In 1215, Frederick II had Charlemagne exhumed yet again. He commissioned a goldsmith to make a huge and richly decorated gold casket, which would hold the deceased king's now bones, as his skin had decayed due to the time that he passed and the repeated disturbing of the remains. What was created was known as the Carla Shrine, and it was placed in the centre of the Palatine Chapel to begin with. The shrine is incredibly decorated in gold and silver and has many religious figures on it. Today it would be worth millions and millions. But then, as predicted yet again, the shrine and resting place were broken into. In 1349, some of the bones were removed by Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV. He then had a gold reliquary made to hold a thigh bone and a bust of Charlemagne, which held the skull cap. Louis XI of France then did a similar thing, taking the ulna and radius of the right arm, and he made a reliquary of an arm to hold the bones. In 1861, the remains were exhumed yet again, but this time so they could be studied. The skeleton of Charlemagne was reconstructed, and it was discovered that he was around 6'4" tall. Some estimated that he was even taller. The investigation showed he had broken his right collarbone in life, which had revealed that he had an elongated skull, showing signs of old age. In 1988, another investigation took place, but this one was done in secret. A total of 94 bones and fragments were found and tested, and the results showed that the remains belonged to Charlemagne and confirmed his height and slim stature. Today, inside of the cathedral in Ancien, the remains of Charlemagne are housed within the gilded golden coffin and shrine. They haven't been touched or looked at for 40 years, and have been left to rest, finally. There isn't more which could be discovered about the iconic king's life and death from the body, so it's likely that 1200 years on from his death, that the remains and corpse of one of the most brilliant medieval kings in Europe will finally be left to rest. Thank you for watching, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And again, thank you so much for watching.